Hey, everybody, let's jump in and get started. So we are on concurrent session C, and I'm glad that everybody made it back after break. The farther you go into the sessions, the more they kind of sneak out and do things they gotta do, but I'm glad that you guys showed back up here. So for this session, we have support learning through competency-based assignments, essentially giving them your students competency-based assignments instead of just things where they have to check off the box and meet certain requirements. Kari Lamoreaux is going to present on this today, and I'm going to pass the time over to her and not steal it. So go ahead, Kari.
Okay, I am really excited to be here today. My background is competency-based education. I taught at a technical college for about 15 years, and then I ran their curriculum department for another 3 or 4. And it's always difficult for me to move into traditional lockstep classes after having taught competency-based. So as I transitioned into Utah State, I have had to try to figure out how to balance giving grades and keeping with the schedule and still really supporting students' learning. I don't know how many of you had a chance to watch the session this morning. There was a session called Ungrading Underground, and it didn't say competency-based education, but that's exactly what they were talking about. And if you didn't get to attend that one, you may want to watch that if this is something that you're interested in. That's some really great ideas, and they shared a book that they had been discussing together. So for just a minute, let's talk about grades. I want you to think for a minute if you have ever felt this way. You have a student who works really hard in your class, but they do not do well on your assignments or your projects or your assessments. And you know that they're a scholarship student. So you know that if you give them the grade that they deserve, you're putting their scholarship in jeopardy. So what do? Well, we provide extra credit opportunities. We give points for participation, right? We give points for citizenship. Did they participate in class? Did they come to class on time? Did they attend every class? We start to find ways to give the student the grade that they need so that we don't put their scholarship in jeopardy, even though we know that the work that they're turning in really doesn't meet the quality that we expect from our students. Has anybody ever experienced that? That was really hard for me. And it's made me really stop and ask, what is a grade? What does a grade mean? I always believed that grades were supposed to reflect what students know and how well they learned and how well they did on their assignments. Let's take that back. Grades, I always thought grades would reflect what students learned. And I want to share an example, and I'm going to use 2 of my own children because they're perfect examples and they don't mind if I talk about them. So I have a son, Brandon, who's incredibly smart. He is really good at math, and it comes really easy to him. So he went to college his first year, took a math class, and he just raced through the assignments. In fact, he didn't even do half of the homework because he didn't need to. And then he'd take the tests and he would get every single answer right on the test. But he only ended up with a B in that class because he skipped class because he didn't need the lectures. He didn't get A's on the tests, even though he had the right answers, because he didn't show his work. And he often didn't do his homework because it was a waste of time because he already knew the content. So now let's compare that to my other daughter. I have a daughter named Allie, and she just took her first stats class, and it was actually at Utah State, and she struggled. But she is a straight A student, and she knows how to get the A. So she worked really hard. She did every homework assignment, made sure she got the right answers on the homework. She retook her quizzes until she got the right grade. She was on every Zoom class, so she got attendance and participation points. She did every extra credit that there was. And she barely passed her tests. And the worst thing is her final, the worst grade of the class. She did worse every single unit. But at the end of the semester, she got an A because she followed all the rules and she did what the teacher asked her. So what does a grade really mean? And I think that's something that I that we need to think about as we go through the rest of this today. And I have so much to share, so I'm probably going to talk fast. In our traditional system of grading, grades typically show that students completed a task, they complied with all of the rules and the instructions, they attended class, arrived on time, they were prepared, they participated, and some points come from actually completing assignments and doing well on the tests. But for many classes, students earning a grade is kind of like playing a chess game, right? It's all about the moves and the strategies and what do I need to do to accumulate points. And students spend more time focusing on what grade they get than they do on learning the content. So why is this? Well, because first of all, that's what they learned in high school. So they come to college with those same habits, but also because grades are what get you into college and grades are what get you the scholarships. So now we've placed this value on grades that really has nothing to do with learning. So why does this matter? Why don't we just keep doing what we've always done? Well, the world is changing, right? The world in the past, we were in an industrial world where we had managers who told us exactly what to do and we were supposed to follow the rules. We had to meet the deadlines and our days were spent completing very specific tasks that really didn't require very much thought. And today with automation, we need to prepare our students for a world in where they take initiative, where they solve problems, where they know how to be creative, and where they know how to accomplish really complex tasks. Students really need to know how to use the knowledge, not just regurgitate it on a test. So this means that learning should be defined not by what students know, but what they can do with what they know. Learning needs to have specific objectives and students need to master those objectives. And that brings us to competency-based education. Now, for some people, this idea is a new idea, but competency-based education has actually been around since the 1900s. When I first started studying career and technical education, I realized that Germany and Russia used a method of instruction where they had to complete a task, master the skill before they were allowed to move on to the next task. That's competency-based education. And that was written in a book from like the 1890s. So this is not new, but we are working our way back around to it. Competency-based education really is a change in the way that we think about grading. So let me share this quote. In our relentless pursuit of the almighty A and the perfect GPA, something got lost. Learning. Grades became the be-all and end-all, the goal itself, not an indicator of achieving the goal of learning. Grades have become the commodity, the badge to success, and smarts, the ticket to college. And I don't know if you agree with that, but that fits very well with the experience that I've had. My students could care less what they learn. They want an A in the class. So as teachers, we have an opportunity to structure our classes in a way that we can scaffold their learning and still help them earn an A. In fact, the way they earn an A is by learning. And if we do it right, every single student can earn the A. They get to choose. And I see Donna nodding. She was in the class this morning and I thought, oh my gosh, these go so well together, right? Okay, so let's talk for a second about learning. Learning should be defined not by what students know, but by what they can do with what they know. This really forces us to move away from read a chapter, take a test, read a chapter, take a test, read a chapter, take a test. If that is your method of teaching, competency-based is not going to work very well. Competency-based is much more about doing and actually showing that we mastered a skill, not memorized information. So let's share a few elements of competency-based. First of all, competency-based has assignments and assessments that have very specific, measurable, and even transferable learning objectives that empower the students so they know exactly what's expected of them. If we don't have assignments if we don't have objectives for our assignments and our assessments, how do students know what they're going to be graded on, right? In competency-based education, assessments, and this is mostly formative, but because we use formative, it really affects the summative. Assessments become meaningful and positive learning experiences for the students. Okay, how many of your students would describe your assessments as meaningful and positive. I think most students would never use those words, right? In competency-based education, students receive timely and differentiated support based on their individual needs. We call this feedback. This is a really critical part of competency-based education is the feedback. And then lastly, students advance when they've demonstrated mastery, which is a little tricky in a lockstep class because we need to keep moving ahead, right? So hopefully I can share some specific tools that are going to help you, but I want to talk to you for just a second. I want to move on and talk for just a second about the results of the traditional system versus competency-based. In a traditional system, we test, we teach, and we move on, right? That's what we do. We teach it, we assess it, and then we move on. So grades are permanent and students have one chance to get it right. The result of that is that there's this perception that learning should be error-free and that students don't ever want to make mistakes. And we know that that's not right. As teachers, we know that learning is all about making mistakes and looking at what we did and figuring out why did that happen and how do we do better, right? And this creates this fear of asking questions, a fear of failure. My daughter is just finishing cosmetology at a technical college, and she has what they call the baby boards. Now they have to do the boards, which are state tests, in order to get licensed. Well, to prepare them for that, they do the baby boards at the college. And basically, it is exactly what they're going to do when they go to the state testing. Exactly. Same time, same skills, same everything. And then the students at the end receive all this feedback about what they did really well and what they can improve on. And then they receive either a passing or failing grade. And she was terrified of failing. And I asked her, what happens if you fail? And she's like, I'd have to take them again. And I'm like, and that's such a bad thing? Like, you'd get more practice. So I don't understand what the big deal is about failing. And that was really a new thought for her. I mean, she had really not slept the night before, and she was so anxious when I said, what's the big deal? If you fail, you just sign up for the next ones next week and try it again. And that was a whole new thought process for her, because in high school, if you fail, you're done, one and done, right? In the traditional system, I'm trying to think how to say this. We teach, we assess, and then we move on. And we don't really have an opportunity to revise and resubmit. So in competency-based education, there's some things that we can do that really help them master the ideas. And so for one thing, instruction becomes really short lessons. We don't stand up and lecture all the time. We give a really short lesson, and then we check for understanding. And if possible, we check for understanding with some type of project, not necessarily a quiz. Although you can do a quiz, but if you do a quiz, you better be ready to let them retake that quiz until they get it right, because competency-based, we don't move on until we show it. I love in competency-based that homework is used to check for understanding, right? It is not for grading. It's a chance to get feedback. Now, that's hard for us because the homework is what scaffolds or supports the failing test grades. If we don't grade homework, then those summative assessments become really important, and students that fail a summative assessment might fail the class. But remember, in competency-based understanding, before they ever get to the summative assessment, you're already confident, and they're already confident that they know what to do. Think how my daughter feels now going to the state test, because she's already passed it. She knows that she's got those skills. Another thing that we really need to work on is we need to not penalize students for struggles. You know, using an average is something that we try to do to help students, not the one and done. But when we average, then that means every time they retake, if they mess up, it's affecting their score. So again, we're teaching them that they can't make mistakes in the learning process. So when we let somebody retake or revise or resubmit, we need to make sure that we replace that score and they end up with the highest, not with an average. That way there's no penalty when they make mistakes. And then learning is graded, and there is no one-shot learning. Only the last and the best effort is what counts. so they can try and try and try again until they get it right. I really like this quote, and I know we're supposed to limit on PowerPoint, but I thought sometimes it helps to be able to read it. So when we use feedback instead of grades during the learning process, students develop perseverance based on expectation of success. And that's kind of a wordy thing, right? But students will keep trying until they succeed because they know they can. And it's this amazing thing when they're motivated to try again. Students analyze their mistakes, they figure out what they did wrong, and then they figure out strategies to succeed, to manage that failure. And when competency-based education works, it works really well, and it's a really beautiful thing. But I will tell you, it's not going to work for every student because some students are so set in getting the grade that it is really hard to move them into this idea that you need to actually learn, not just earn points. So what do? How do we do this when we're in a lockstep, define start, define stop course? Well, really the key lies in offering more formative assessment and allowing for revision and resubmission of any formative assessment. And this could even be an actual written test if you want it to be, but we've got to give students a chance to learn from their mistakes. There's one problem with that. Can you think what it is? This takes a lot of time and we're busy and we have classes with lots of students. So I actually did an asynchronous session where I teach how to do macros in Microsoft Word. So if you're someone who gives feedback in a Word document, look at that. I have since learned how to do macros in Canvas, and but the conference is over. So I'll be teaching that next year. But one thing that we can do is we can use our rubrics. And I did hear someone in the earlier session say, I don't use rubrics anymore, but I use them religiously. But I'm very careful in how I use my rubrics, and my rubrics are not point driven. They're, yes, they showed competency, or no, they didn't. So I want to show with you some of the things that I do in Canvas that might help you. So we're going to leave the PowerPoint for a second, and I'm pretty sure this is going to work. So let me show you right here an assignment. So this, I teach business writing. Now, business writing is a perfect class to do competency-based because we know that writing, the more you practice, the better you get. But writing is so time-consuming to grade. So I combine a bunch of different methods to try to make it really efficient. So one of the things that I've learned to do is I've learned in my instructions to identify what the objectives are. But I don't put them in a list up at the top. I actually put them in the instructions because students skip right to the instructions. What do I have to do? So you have to demonstrate a pre-writing. You have to demonstrate the indirect persuasive organization. You have to demonstrate the ABC organization. You have to demonstrate rewriting, and that's made up of these three things. So my objectives are right in the instructions. And then if you look at my rubric, demonstrate the use of pre-writing, demonstrate the indirect approach, demonstrate the ABC format. So there's a one-to-one thing. I do tell them here in my grading criteria, this assignment will be graded complete or incomplete. The rubric will be a tool for providing feedback, and the scores that you receive will not affect your grade. So I also, this assignment happens to be a peer-reviewed assignment, and the great thing is the peer reviewers can use the same rubric. And it's
Hi, Kari, we can't see your what you're showing.
You can't see.
I can just see the PowerPoint. We're not seeing Canvas.
Okay, let me do this. Thank you for saying that, because it's not going to make near as much sense. I'm going to go ahead and end this show. Let me close this and let me go into here. Can you see it now?
Just see the PowerPoint.
Yeah,
Kari,
you might have to end share and then start again.
Okay, new share. Okay, let's do that. Does that work?
perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
sorry. I'm new. I teach online, so I don't do Zoom. So thank you for catching me on that. Okay, so here's my instructions. You can see I've highlighted in blue my objectives, right? So they're right there. They're very clear for the students. They know it. And then when I come down to my rubric, you can see that there they are again. And each one of these criteria are in blue up above. So there's a one-to-one relationship. It's very clear for students. Every one of my assignments, I tend to talk about what the assignment is, the purpose, then I give them their instructions, and then I give them the grading criteria. And the grading criteria, I tell them, this is complete or incomplete. So let me show you really quickly, though, what you need to do in order to set this up in Canvas if you haven't ever done this. So I'm going to edit my assignment for a minute. Right here, this display grade, this is where I mark it complete or incomplete. So it's really easy. And I still tell how many points because those points affect the grade, but it's a complete or incomplete. If you haven't done peer reviews, there's my peer review stuff. I cannot, let's see if I can move this. There we go. I can't get to the place where I save it. So then my rubric that I have set up, you can see is set up with the criteria and then the ratings. Now I have 3 different competency-based ones I'm going to share with you. This one gives you the competency level: expert, competent, or developing. Now on some of mine, I put missing because it may be something that they were supposed to do and it's just not there. But on this rubric, when I created the rubric, if you notice, there's no place for points. The reason that I used the 1, 2, 3 is because when you don't use points in your rubric, it alphabetizes your ratings. And I wanted them in this order. But the way that you, so if you can edit your rubric and then right down here where it says remove the points, when you remove the points, what it allows you to do is it allows you to mark the rubric, provide the feedback, but it doesn't affect the grade. The grade becomes complete or incomplete. So that's how I structure this assignment. Now, I want to share with you really quickly. So this is the one where the competency level. Another rubric that I do is the expectation level. And it would be the exact same assignment, but in here you can see that I have exceeds expectation, meets expectation, needs a little bit of work, or is missing. So this is another way that I can give feedback to students, and I can click on the box and it's related to the objective and they know exactly where they are in that learning progress. The other rubric that I use, and I use a lot, is my yes or no rubric. Same competencies, right? But I just have a yes or a no. On this particular rubric, I have the points, and they have to get a certain number of points to pass. So if you want to use it that way, you could say you have to have 4 out of 6, or you have to have 6 out of 6. I want to quickly go into the assignment as if I were grading. So here's a student assignment. You can see that I like to give feedback in the actual document. But when I go to mark the rubric, I can say yes, no, they didn't do this. This was good, this was good, this was good, this was no, this was yes. You can see that it does it with red and green. Well, I try to do my comments in their assignment the same way. Green are their strengths, yellow are suggestions, and red are things that have to be fixed. So I actually color code my feedback. I know I'm a little over the top. I like though the green is their strengths, and I really like to identify their strengths because I think it's really important for them to know what they did right. If they accidentally did something right and we don't tell them that it was right, they won't know to repeat it or to replicate it in their next assignment. So when something's done really well, I like to tell them. I never leave my rubric just with the yes and no's. If there's a no, I always go in and provide specific feedback. So I can tell them the benefits were not given before the request. The purpose was not in the first paragraph. And then I can give them that. And then if they did something really well, so I can tell them there were no errors. Great work. And I can go through that and then I can say save. Now you'll notice they still don't have a grade right here. So they've got the rubric, they've got my feedback, but I still get to decide whether it's complete or incomplete. And then that's what you have to decide. How many of the elements are required? For me, When I'm doing competency-based, every element has to be passed. So this would be an incomplete. And then I would just come down here and tell them you need to work on these two things. Let me know if you have any questions. Be sure to look at my comments in Canvas because I've given you very detailed feedback. And my students get really quick at knowing to go look for that feedback. So that's how I would structure a rubric. And you can see that that allows you to give pretty specific feedback. If you don't want to do the comments in here and you just want to use the rubric, you can really get pretty good at giving the feedback without having to do all of the individual comments. So rubrics and competency-based education actually work really, really well. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Let's get through to where we were. Okay. So the difference between the old system and the new system. In the old system, all of the students are treated the same and have the exact same expectations. So when that happens, when the time is fixed, then it's the achievement or the learning that varies. In competency-based, students receive personalized support and feedback, and then when the time varies, we can hold achievement fixed. So how do we do this within a scheduled class? Well, the way that I've chosen to do it is I have due dates for the first draft of every assignment. And then I give them their feedback and I give them 1 week to revise and resubmit for a higher grade. And I feel very comfortable giving zeros because if they didn't master the writing skill that we were talking about, they don't deserve to pass the class. So they get a 0 on that one. And then I tell them you have 1 week from today to revise and resubmit, and you can revise and resubmit as many times as you want. I will grade it every time you're willing to turn it in.
Kari, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So during that period of time, the week that you give them, are you just launching into the next body of content and next assignment and everything?
I am.
Okay.
I am moving ahead. Thankfully, most of my assignments, unlike a math class where you have to master this part to do the next equation, writing isn't quite the same way. And so I can talk about different elements of writing. I also teach personal finance, the same thing. We can talk about credit, different from insurance, so I'm really lucky that way. And so I don't have to have them pass to move on. If I had something that were very sequential, I would probably turn my class. I would probably make it totally competency-based, get rid of due dates and lock my modules. So you have to pass this module to move on. It does make group work hard because students aren't at the same place, but Canvas will allow you to lock certain assignments that they can't even look at it until they've completed a previous assignment. And if you're interested in that, talk to your instructional designer. I'm sure they know how, or you can ask me. That's what I did when I taught at the tech college because my students had a million different start dates and they weren't in a lockstep. For here, I give them 1 week, and then every once in a while in the semester, I give a free week to catch up. And I say, this week, we won't have any new content. You need to be working on the assignments that you have not done. And always the last week before finals, I call it my catch-up week or my free week. And I actually give them the opportunity to go back and revise and resubmit an assignment that they chose not to, even though the 1 week has passed. And so that captures a lot of them. They kind of get to the end and they go, oh, maybe I should, redo some of those assignments. I'm a real stickler. If you don't turn it in on time, you don't get to revise and resubmit. If I have a draft and a final and you don't do the draft, you don't get to revise and resubmit. So it really puts the ownership on the students to take responsibility. And I'm very hard-nosed about that until the student calls me. And I teach communication, I teach soft skills. So if they'll call me and we can talk about it and we can have a one-on-one discussion, then I might give them another chance. But as far as just the rules, I have really strict rules and students do it. Most of them will revise and resubmit. Some of them never do. And then when they get the failing grade, I don't feel bad. I just don't feel bad. Shelley, you have a question?
I just wanted to sneak in for a second, so you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm almost done, so this is great. Okay, so the challenge that we face is that this feedback loop, this do it, receive feedback, revise it, turn it back in again, receive more, takes a lot of time. So my one suggestion is start small. Don't do every single assignment in your class competency-based. Pick the most important ones that really, really teach the skills that you want your students to master and focus on those. And if you will start small, you can pretty much, you can build this in. And I think as more of us do this, and I keep watching Donna and she's nodding her head. I think, Donna, as more of us do this, students will get more used to this idea that it's about learning and revising and resubmitting. So as we work towards this, I think that we are, as an institution, going to really be able to help our students focus. So competency-based education, we are focusing on the learning, not on the grades. Here's a couple of benefits. There's no gaming the system. There's no way to score a bunch of points and win. The only way to win is to actually learn the content. Concerns about students going out and saying, hey, this was what was on the test, you need to study this. It's not a problem. It is not a problem because you already told the students what's on the test or what's on the assessment. It is upfront. They know exactly what they have to know. And when you're doing competency-based, the need to cheat is even reduced. But the thing that I love is the test anxiety is reduced because students feel confident when they go into that summative assessment, right? And then finally, teacher is no longer the judge. Now we're their advocate. Now our goal is to help them learn, and we can shift our focus from grading to really assessing their performance and their progress and providing them with great feedback. So I hope you guys will get brave and try this. It's a really powerful way to support student learning. And if we've got a couple minutes, I'll take questions or comments if you've done this and want to share. Marlene? You're muted.
Thanks. I always forget that part.
I know.
I wanted to just thank you for your presentation and also the quad side presentation. That was really helpful to me as well. So many times during this presentation, I wanted to stand up and clap because I so agree with what you said.
Oh, good.
My biggest challenge, and you addressed this a little bit, is the amount of time it takes, especially in a large enrollment course. And so question number one, I'm a little bit curious to know how many students you have in a course. And then question number two, in the examples you shared at the beginning with your son and daughter, using competency-based grading, what do you feel like the fair grade should have been for both of them?
So first of all, in my writing class, I only have 30 students because it is really writing intensive, and I am grading not just organization and style, but I'm teaching grammar, spelling, and punctuation. So I have tried to teach more and I've just had to limit it to 30, but I have a personal finance class and I have 70 students, and it's hard. And I've really had to learn to give really specific feedback and to really focus the assignments on specific assignments and not give busy work. And I tell my students that right up front. Every assignment you do, I promise I will be looking at. So there's no busy work in this class. So you give me your best work. And the interesting thing is the more I do this and the better I get at it, the fewer revisions my students need because I find I'm teaching it up front better. So, and then when I look at my son deserved an A. He understood the math. He got the right answers. His final exam, he had 100% of the answers right. He just didn't need the step by step by step. And then my poor daughter, she got a 70 on the final. She did not know that content. Now, I'm really glad the teacher didn't give her a C because she is a scholarship student and I don't want her to lose her scholarship. But how do you get a student who shows 70% on the final and they end up with an A in the class? So are grades representing how hard our students work, or are grades representing what our students learn? And that's really the question we have to ask. Any other comments?
We have time for one more question if we want to sneak it in under the buzzer.
I just must have done really well and answered all the questions, right?
I have a question. Do you have any
Yes.
suggestions for courses that do build and how you might structure those so that people can move forward, but still give that time for students to like catch up?
My biggest question would be, how important is group work in that class? Is it an individualized? Like in math, you don't need group work, right? But in some classes, that collaboration, working together, is really instrumental. If you don't need group work, then my suggestion is to move away from lectures and a schedule and turn the class into competency-based so that they work through an assignment. And when they finish one assignment, the next one unlocks. And I would then put my little mini lessons in as video inside of the different modules. And I would just move them forward that way. And I tell them at the beginning of the class, and I would turn class into a lab. I will be here every Monday from 5 to 6 and Wednesday from 5, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever your hours are. I would turn that into a lab where students can come get help.
So you're saying base it a little bit more on the level of engagement that's necessary between students, right? So that you could work with students individually and take time to do that, where other students who are getting it can move quicker through the material.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I would have a timeline. In order to get through this class by the end of the semester, this is where you should be. And students who weren't at that point, I would probably take the time to check in with them. How come you're not at this point? What can we do to get you there? But I would take away due dates and I would just say, or take away the penalty for late work. You could put due dates to keep them on track, but if they're not ready for it, they still can turn it in when they get to it.
That's great insight. Thank you, Kari.
You're welcome.
Okay, we can continue a conversation we're having on Mighty Networks, and Kari's going to send me her PowerPoint, so I'll put that up in the session slide as well. And she has her email right there if you want to reach out to her individually and get more information.
I have learned a really cool tool where you can do macros in any canvas. So if you're interested in that, my son taught me, my brilliant son. So I'd love to share.
Awesome. Thanks, Kari. Okay,
right,
we have our
thanks,
next
everybody.
sessions starting in just a little bit at 2:45 for our concurrent session D. Everyone can jump over there. And thanks for an amazing session again, Kari. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks, everybody.